Berry Gordy, names 13. Black lesbian stars from the past. What if I told you that some of the most powerful women in music history icons who shaped jazz, soul, disco, R&B, and even hip-hop were forced to hide the most important truth about who they loved, and what if the person finally exposing it is Motown founder Berry Gordy himself? From red carpets to secret romances, from public perfection to private rebellion. These 13 black lesbian legends risked everything just to exist. This isn't gossip. This is erased history finally resurfacing. Before we dive in, smash that like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell, because on Legends of Black Excellence, we reveal the stories they tried to bury. Are you ready? Josephine Baker. When Berry Gordy, founder of Motown and one of the most powerful figures in black music history, finally acknowledged that several legendary women in the industry were secretly lesbian. The name that shocked everyone most was Josephine Baker. Long before Motown even existed, Josephine was breaking every boundary imaginable. Born in 1906 in St. Louis, she escaped the violent racism of America and moved to Paris in 1925, where she became the first black international superstar. She danced in her iconic banana skirt, earned the equivalent of millions in today's money, and socialized with kings, queens, and aristocrats. But behind the glamour, Baker carried a secret life, one filled with romantic relationships with women that biographers have documented in personal letters, diaries, and eyewitness accounts. At a time when being both black and female already made survival difficult, loving women could have ended everything. Yet Josephine didn't just survive, she dominated. Baker's relationships were not casual rumors. They were deeply emotional and well-recorded. She shared intimate letters with Frida Kahlo, spent luxurious vacations with European duchesses, and was financially supported by wealthy female patrons who doubled as lovers. Biographer Phyllis Rose confirmed at least 5 long-term female relationships that extended beyond friendship. Baker never labeled herself, but she embraced fluidity in a world that had no language for it. She once said, "I fall in love with people, not gender." In 1937, she married a Frenchman to protect her career, but even then, women continued living in her estate. She didn't deny it, and the mystery only magnified her magnetism. While America tried to silence her, Europe celebrated her complexity. What makes Josephine's story even more astonishing is how she used her sexuality strategically. During World War II, she became a spy for the French resistance. She charmed Nazi officers at elite parties and smuggled classified notes hidden in her sheet music. Her most valuable intel didn't come from men. It came from their wives and mistresses, women who opened up to her intimately. Without firing a gun, she helped dismantle Axis plans and was awarded the Croix de Guerre and Legion of Honor, France's highest military medals. After the war, Baker returned to America as a powerful activist. She refused to perform for segregated audiences and spoke at the March on Washington in 1963, standing beside Martin Luther King Jr. Yet even as she fought for justice, whispers about her personal life followed like shadows. Josephine Baker proved that identity cannot be erased, only buried. She was an artist, spy activist, mother of 12 adopted children from different races, and now finally acknowledged as one of the most influential queer figures in history. The fact that Berry Gordy, a man known for protecting the Motown image, has spoken her truth signals a cultural shift. It forces us to confront the reality that black queer women built the foundation of global music, even when the world tried to write them out of their own stories. Baker lived fearlessly, but died with many questions still unanswered. So today, the real conversation begins. If Josephine Baker had lived in a world where she could love openly, how much more powerful could she have been? And why did it take nearly 100 years for the industry to speak her name without fear? Donna Summer. When Berry Gordy openly acknowledged Donna Summer as one of the 13 black lesbian stars from the past, it sent shockwaves through music history. Known as the Queen of Disco, Donna wasn't just a singer. She was the sound of an entire cultural revolution. From the mid-1970s to the early 1980s, she dominated the Billboard charts with hits like Hot Stuff Bad Girls and Last Dance, selling over 100 million records worldwide. Her voice ignited dance floors, but it wasn't just straight audiences who crowned her. The LGBTQ+ community worshipped her music, turning her songs into anthems of liberation. Yet beneath the sequins and spotlight, Donna lived a carefully crafted public image of a married mother, one that hid deeper truths the industry refused to touch. Throughout her career, rumors swirled about Donna's close connections with women behind the scenes. Studio insiders whispered about late-night sessions and intimate friendships that went far beyond typical collaboration. She often traveled with the same group of women, shared hotel suites, and formed bonds that insiders described as intense and unbreakable. But no mainstream outlet dared to report it. The disco world was filled with queer culture, but the business side was conservative and ruthless. Donna's management team reportedly warned her that any suggestion of same-sex relationships would destroy endorsements and radio play. The pressure to appear traditional was so intense that when she got pregnant out of wedlock, the label forced her to stage a fake marriage to protect her image. Then everything changed when Donna underwent a religious transformation in the early 1980s and became a born-again Christian. Suddenly, the woman who had once represented freedom started making controversial statements about sin and morality. She was accused of saying AIDS is God's punishment, a quote she always denied, but the damage was irreversible. Gay fans felt betrayed. Ironically, this rift sparked deeper curiosity about her personal life. If she was so connected to gay culture, why the hostility? Some argued it was internal conflict. Others believed it was industry pressure. Several former associates claimed she had private relationships with women, but suppressed them out of fear. Donna never confirmed or denied anything, keeping her romantic life more guarded than any other star of her era. Despite the controversy, Donna Summer's legacy remains monumental. She won 5 Grammy Awards, became the first artist with 3 double albums reaching #1, and shaped the sound of pop dance and electronic music for generations. But now, with Gordy acknowledging her place among hidden lesbian icons, history is being rewritten. Donna was more than her public contradictions. She was a woman caught between desire and expectation, faith and freedom, love and survival. She lived in a time when truth could end a career, and yet her influence never faded. So as we uncover these realities, one question becomes unavoidable. Was Donna Summer protecting her image or protecting her heart from a world that wasn't ready for the real her? Sylvia Robinson. When Gordy named Sylvia Robinson as one of the 13 black lesbian stars from the past, many were stunned not because her name lacked importance, but because her influence had been quietly underestimated for decades. Sylvia wasn't just a singer, she was the mother of hip-hop. In 1979, she produced Rapper's Delight, the first commercially successful rap song in history, selling over 5 million copies worldwide and dragging hip-hop out of Bronx block parties into mainstream America. Before that, she had already scored hits like Love is Strange, 1957, and Pillow Talk, 1973, proving herself across multiple eras. But while the world knew her music, almost no one knew her truth. Behind elegant dresses and perfect smiles, Sylvia lived a life full of secrets protected by power, money, and silence. During the 1950s and 1960s, Sylvia moved through the New York music scene with an ease few black women had. She owned nightclubs, mentored artists, and understood underground culture better than any male executive. This access allowed her to form deep relationships, especially with women. Former colleagues described certain assistants who lived with her traveled everywhere and acted more like romantic partners than staff. Music journalists writing Sugar Hill retrospectives hinted at intense female companionship, but stopped short of naming it. She even married Joe Robinson and had children, maintaining the illusion of traditional family life. Insiders claimed the marriage was more business partnership than romance. Yet because Sylvia was the boss, no one dared confront her about the women constantly at her side. Her position as a queer woman in a male-dominated industry was incredibly dangerous. The 1970s music business was brutal. One rumor could end your career or invite violence. So Sylvia used a brilliant survival tactic. She built power. With Sugar Hill Records, she controlled artist distribution and radio relationships. She signed the Sugar Hill Gang, Grandmaster Flash, and the Furious Five and produced The Message, one of the most important rap songs ever recorded. While male CEOs flexed publicly, Sylvia operated in silence. Lawsuits over royalties and financial scandal eventually destroyed Sugar Hill, but oddly, her private life never did. The media tore down every male executive, but left her alone. Why? Because she had dirt on everyone, and everyone knew it. By the time Sylvia Robinson died in 2011, most obituaries praised her innovation, but ignored the whispers that followed her for half a century. Now that Gordy has spoken her truth, the puzzle pieces finally connect a powerful black woman in the 1960s-80s, protecting both her empire and her identity. She didn't just break rules, she built new ones. She gave birth to hip-hop, funded entire music movements, and quietly lived in a way the world wasn't ready to understand. Her story forces us to ask deeper questions. How many genres were built by queer black women who had to stay invisible? And if Sylvia Robinson was brave enough to lead hip-hop from the shadows, what might she have done if she could live in the light? Grace Jones. When Gordy included Grace Jones among the 13 black lesbian legends of the past, it didn't feel like an outing. It felt like confirmation. Grace never fit inside any box model, singer, actress, performance artist. Fashion, revolutionary, and cultural disruptor. Born in Jamaica in 1948 and raised in a strict religious household, she broke free and moved to New York, entering the fashion world where her androgynous beauty terrified agencies until Paris discovered her. By the 1970s and 80s, Grace Jones had become the face of Studio 54, the muse of designers like Jean-Paul Gaultier, and the embodiment of sexual freedom. She kissed men and women publicly, wore razor-sharp suits instead of dresses, and sang with a voice both angelic and feral. The world didn't know how to label her, but it couldn't look away. While most female stars were forced to hide their sexuality, Grace made it impossible to ignore. She arrived at clubs with male lovers one night and female partners the next, danced topless and laughed at reporters who asked her to clarify. Interview magazine openly listed her as bisexual, and European tabloids constantly covered her relationships with women. She even dated Swedish model Dolph Lundgren, but also had intense long-term connections with female artists and dancers. Grace never used the word lesbian, but she rejected the idea of being limited to men. She famously said, "I go with the energy, not the body." In an era where queerness could destroy careers, she made it part of her brand and turned it into power. Grace's impact went far beyond music. Her album Nightclubbing, 1981, remains one of the most influential records in pop history, blending reggae, new wave, and funk. David Bowie, Prince, Madonna, Rihanna, and Lady Gaga all cite her as a blueprint. She became a global queer icon without ever needing a label, representing liberation for anyone who felt other. Her performances were theatrical rebellions. She appeared in cages covered in mud or with a flat-top haircut and armor-like suits. She blurred gender long before words like non-binary entered pop culture. Even as Hollywood cast her in films like Conan the Destroyer and A View to a Kill, she refused to play beautiful and quiet. Instead, she was loud, dangerous, fearless. What makes Grace Jones unforgettable is that she didn't just survive the industry, she reshaped it. At a time when queer black women were erased, she stood in the spotlight and dared the world to define her. Gordy acknowledging her as part of this hidden history isn't a scandal, it's overdue recognition. Grace's life proves that sexuality is not weakness, but weapon. Not a secret, but a signature. She never apologized for who she was, and that defiance helped future generations live more freely. Mary J. Blige. When Berry Gordy included Mary J. Blige among the 13 black lesbian stars from the past, it forced the world to reconsider everything we thought we knew about her. Mary isn't just a singer, she is the voice of survival. Rising from poverty in Yonkers, she became the queen of hip-hop soul, blending R&B emotion with raw street honesty. With over 100 million records sold, 9 Grammy Awards, 2 Oscar nominations, and a career spanning more than 30 years, she turned her pain into generational anthems, like No More Drama, Be Without You, and My Life. But Mary built her career on brutal honesty, while carefully hiding one part of herself, the part Berry Gordy just brought into the light. In the early 2000s, fans and tabloids noticed something unusual. Mary was almost never seen without a particular group of women stylists, managers, creative partners who appeared to be far more than co-workers. Insiders described emotional dependencies, long trips together, and jealousy when others got too close. Mary often said she didn't trust men, and many noticed that her deepest bonds were always with women. While she married Kendu Isaacs in 2003, industry veterans claimed it felt more like a business partnership than a romance. After their divorce, Mary revealed she was controlled, isolated, and financially drained, language that resembled surviving a performance rather than a marriage. Mary has always been open about trauma, abuse, addiction, depression, suicidal thoughts, but she never discussed her romantic life in detail. When asked about love, she often changed the subject or spoke in metaphors. Multiple journalists have said interview questions about sexuality were off limits. Fashion insiders mentioned that Mary had intense emotional relationships with women in the 90s that everyone knew about, but no one printed. She even refused to label herself, saying, "People will twist anything I say." So I keep what's sacred to myself. For a woman who made a career telling the truth, this silence was loud. Now that Berry Gordy has acknowledged her among hidden lesbian icons, it reframes Mary J. Blige's entire story. It explains the guardedness, the heartbreak in her lyrics, and the constant battle to be respected in a male-dominated industry. Mary didn't hide out of shame, she hid to survive. Yet even within that cage, she changed music forever, inspired millions, and became the blueprint for vulnerability in R&B. Her legacy is not just about pain, it's about power. So now the world must ask, if Mary J. Blige had been allowed to love freely from the beginning, would her voice have been even stronger? Or was the secret part of the fire that made her unstoppable? Eartha Kitt. When Berry Gordy listed Eartha Kitt among the 13 black lesbian stars of the past, history suddenly snapped into focus. Eartha wasn't just a performer, she was a force of nature. Born in 1927 in the Jim Crow South to a black mother and a white plantation owner, she rose from abandonment and abuse to become one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world. She spoke 4 languages, toured 100-plus countries, and conquered Broadway film, television, and music. Her signature purr made her the most iconic Catwoman in 1967, so seductive and dangerous that even Batman couldn't tame her. But while America saw glamour and seduction, it never saw her deepest truth. Eartha did not play by heterosexual rules, and she never intended to. Hollywood had no idea what to do with a woman who refused to submit to men. Eartha openly mocked the idea of marriage, famously saying, "A man comes into my life, and I have to compromise, stupid." She wore tailored suits, danced with women at elite parties, and was surrounded by female companions who traveled, lived, and worked with her. Gossip columns in the 1950s wrote about a sultry singer who prefers female company, and everyone knew who they meant. She had public relationships with men for the cameras, but insiders revealed her most passionate bonds were with powerful women in Europe and New York. She didn't hide, it's just that the media refused to print the truth about a black woman loving freely. Eartha's sexuality wasn't the only reason the industry feared her, it was her courage to speak. In 1968, at a White House luncheon, she confronted President Lyndon B. Johnson's wife and criticized the Vietnam War. The room went silent. Days later, the CIA opened a file on her, calling her a sadistic nymphomaniac, and implying deviant behavior coded language for targeting her politics and rumored relationships with women. She was blacklisted in America for nearly 10 years, but she didn't break. She moved to Europe, performed in sold-out venues, and lived more freely, openly attending events with female partners. While America punished her, the world embraced her authenticity. Eartha Kitt was decades ahead of her time, gender-bending before Grace Jones, outspoken before Madonna, fearless before Beyoncé. She adopted a daughter on her own in 1961, unheard of for a single black woman, fought racial injustice, and lived without apology. Her romantic life remained unconfirmed, not because she was ashamed, but because society wasn't ready to honor it. Now, with Gordy finally acknowledging her truth, Eartha's legacy becomes even more legendary. She didn't just reject the box, they never even caught her long enough to put her in one. So the question we must ask now is, was Eartha Kitt too rebellious for her time? Or was she the future, and the world is only just catching up? Chaka Khan. When Gordy named Chaka Khan as one of the 13 black lesbian stars from the past, many fans were shocked, but insiders weren't. Chaka wasn't just a singer, she was a supernova. Exploding onto the scene in 1973, as the frontwoman of Rufus, she delivered hits like Tell Me Something Good, Sweet Thing, and later solo classics like I'm Every Woman and Ain't Nobody. With 10 Grammy Awards and a career spanning 5 decades, she became the vocal blueprint for Whitney Houston, Beyoncé, Mariah Carey, and every powerhouse who came after. Her stage presence was electric, huge hair, wild costumes, raw sensuality. But under that fearless image was a complicated personal life that the media tiptoed around for years. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, tabloids ran blind items about a funk diva seen in women-only clubs. They never said her name, but the description was obvious. Chaka was often surrounded by female backup singers and musicians who seemed more like partners than employees. People close to her described intense emotional relationships with certain women, some of whom lived in her home for long periods. Even during her 2 public marriages to men, these friendships continued quietly. She once said in an interview, "I love who I love. I don't do labels." In an era where any hint of same-sex attraction could end a career, Chaka walked a dangerous tightrope, refusing to deny anything but never confirming it either. What protected her was her raw honesty in other areas. Chaka spoke openly about addiction, rehab trauma, and self-destruction, even when it made headlines. By admitting the darkest parts of her life, she disarmed the press. They focused on her struggles with drugs and alcohol, ignoring deeper questions about her relationships. The industry often uses scandals to distract from truths it doesn't want to face, and Chaka's sexuality became one of those buried truths. Still, those who toured with her remember the women who stayed backstage, the jealousy when others got too close, the way Chaka's eyes softened around certain female musicians. Her love life wasn't heterosexual. It was fluid, complicated, and fearless. Now that Gordy has acknowledged her among the hidden lesbian legends, history must be rewritten. Chaka Khan wasn't just a voice, she was a rebel who broke every rule of femininity, sexuality, and genre. She proved a black woman could be powerful and sexual on her own terms. She sang, "I'm every woman but the world," never let her be her full self. Even after surviving addiction, industry politics, and personal pain, she still stands as one of the greatest vocalists of all time. So the real question is, did Chaka hide her truth to protect her career? Or was her voice the only way she knew how to tell the world who she really was? Anita Baker. When Gordy included Anita Baker among the 13 black lesbian stars from the past, many were stunned because Anita is one of the most private artists in music history. She wasn't flashy or controversial. She didn't live in the tabloids. Instead, she let her voice do the talking. And what a voice it was. Smooth, rich, intimate, like honey poured over velvet. In 1986, her album Rapture sold over 8 million copies worldwide, won 2 Grammy Awards, and redefined adult contemporary R&B. Sweet Love, Caught Up in the Rapture. Giving You the Best That I Got. Her songs became wedding anthems, love soundtracks, and timeless classics. But while Anita sang about passion, commitment, and intimacy, she never truly showed the world who she loved. Anita's career was built on elegance and control. She rarely gave interviews, avoided red carpets, and fiercely protected her personal life. That silence created mystery, and within that mystery, rumors began to grow. Industry insiders whispered about the women always around her, assistants who lived in her home, female musicians who traveled with her for months, emotional bonds that felt deeper than friendship. She did marry and have children, but even people close to her said the marriage seemed more like a societal expectation than a true romantic connection. Entertainment journalist J. Randy Taraborelli once noted that Anita had romantic intensity with women that the press was too afraid to explore. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, blind items appeared in R&B magazines hinting at a sophisticated soul singer with secret female lovers. They never printed her name, but everyone in the industry knew. Unlike others, Anita wasn't loud or rebellious, she was strategic. She kept her image clean, avoided scandal, and maintained complete artistic control. That protection allowed her to thrive in a male-dominated industry that punished women for stepping out of line. Still, the emotional depth of her love songs, filled with longing, heartbreak, and devotion, made fans wonder, who was she really singing to? Now that Gordy has spoken her truth, Anita Baker's legacy becomes even more powerful. She succeeded in an era when black women were told to be sexy but silent, emotional, but not too real, talented, but not too honest. Yet she quietly built one of the most respected careers in R&B history. She didn't need shock value. She let her voice carry secrets the world wasn't ready to hear. And maybe that was her greatest act of strength. She loved on her own terms, even if the world never knew. So today we must finally ask the question, history avoided. Were Anita Baker's greatest love songs actually confessions? And did the industry force her to sing them in the shadows? Sade Adu. When Gordy named Sade Adu among the 13 black lesbian legends of the past, it felt like unlocking music's most elegant mystery. Sade is not just a singer, she's an atmosphere. With over 50 million albums sold, 4 Grammy Awards, and a career defined by timeless classics like Smooth Operator, No Ordinary Love, By Your Side, she became the queen of quiet power. Unlike other celebrities, she vanished between albums, sometimes disappearing for 10 years at a time, refusing interviews, rarely attending events. Her silence made her mythical. But that silence also protected something deeper, her private life. Especially her relationships with women, whispers the media never dared to print. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Sade was often seen with the same female companions, managers, stylists, musicians, who traveled and lived with her for long periods. Insiders described her as emotionally intense, deeply loyal, and guarded. While she did have relationships with men, including the father of her daughter, people close to her revealed she also had long-term relationships with women that were never made public. European magazines occasionally hinted at her sexuality in vague language like private affairs with close female friends. But American media stayed silent. Why? Because Sade controlled everything, her image, her music, her narrative. She refused to let the industry define her. Sade's music itself hinted at emotional complexity that transcended traditional romance. Songs like Love is Stronger Than Pride and Cherish the Day radiate a kind of devotion that feels genderless, spiritual, and consuming. She never labeled herself, but she once said in a rare interview, "I write from the truth of my heart, not from society's rules." In a world obsessed with visibility, Sade chose invisibility, and that invisibility protected her queerness in an era where one headline could destroy a career. Even when she stepped away from fame to live a quiet life in the English countryside, people closest to her said she was finally living freely away from the spotlight. Gordy's acknowledgement changes the conversation around Sade forever. She wasn't just mysterious, she was strategic. She understood that to survive as a queer black woman in music, she had to build a fortress around her soul. And inside that fortress, she created some of the most emotionally honest music of all time. Sade lived on her own terms, loved beyond labels, and proved that silence can be the loudest form of rebellion. Now the world must face a new truth. Was Sade protecting her privacy? Or was she protecting a love story the industry wasn't ready to respect? Erykah Badu. When Gordy listed Erykah Badu among the 13 black lesbian stars from the past, it made perfect sense to those who truly understood her. Erykah was never just a singer. She was a movement. When she debuted with Baduism in 1997, the album went triple platinum, won 2 Grammys, and single-handedly launched the neo-soul era. Wrapped in headscarves and mystery, she became the voice of a generation that craved authenticity. Her lyrics weren't just songs, they were spiritual confessions, radical poetry, and emotional surgery. But while the world analyzed her art, almost no one understood her personal life. And that was intentional. From the beginning, Erykah refused to be defined by traditional gender or relationship rules. She had high-profile relationships with Andre 3000 Common and the DOC, but she also hinted at attractions beyond men. In multiple interviews, when asked if women ever fall in love with her, she smiled and said women too. Yes. She performed in queer spaces, embraced LGBTQ aesthetics, and built deep, intimate bonds with female dancers, musicians, and creatives who traveled with her. People close to her said her love was energy-based, not gender-based. She never hid it. She just never explained it to people who wouldn't understand. Erykah's queerness wasn't loud or performative. It was spiritual, fluid, and fearless. She blurred the line between masculine and feminine in her style, lyrics, and presence. Her home in Dallas became a creative sanctuary where artists of all identities lived, worked, and loved without judgment. Rumors circulated in the early 2000s about her long-term emotional connection with a well-known female musician, but the media never touched it because Erykah was untouchable. She controlled the narrative. She built her own world. And if the industry didn't accept her truth, she didn't need the industry. Now that Gordy has spoken her name in this context, Erykah Badu's role in queer black history becomes undeniable. She wasn't just an artist, she was a safe space. She showed that love could be cosmic, not boxed in. She raised children, mentored young artists, and shattered every stereotype of what a black woman in music should be. While others hid, she shapeshifted. While others labeled, she transcended. And that leads to the most powerful question of all. Did Erykah Badu keep her relationships with women private to protect her peace? Or was her entire career already a love letter to the freedom to be whoever you are? Marlena Shaw. When Gordy named Marlena Shaw as one of the 13 black lesbian stars from the past, many younger fans were surprised, but music historians were not. Marlena wasn't mainstream like Whitney or Mariah, but among musicians, she was legendary. Her voice blended jazz sophistication with soul fire, making songs like California Soul 1968 and Woman of the Ghetto 1969 timeless classics. She performed with Count Basie, recorded for Blue Note Records, and became one of the most respected jazz vocalists of the 1960s and 70s. On stage, she was witty, sensual, confident, and completely in control. But off stage, she guarded her private life so tightly that her deepest truth lived in whispers until now. Marlena moved through music circles where sexuality was fluid and unspoken, especially in jazz clubs and after-hours sessions. While she had relationships with men, insiders noticed her strongest emotional bonds were always with women, fellow musicians, arrangers, and friends who stayed by her side for years. She often traveled with one specific woman who acted as assistant, but witnesses described their relationship as far more intimate than professional. In interviews, Marlena dodged questions about romance and said, "I live by my own rules." Jazz magazines in the 1980s published vague references to her unconventional partnerships, careful not to expose what the industry didn't want to address: a successful black woman loving freely in a time when that was dangerous. The jazz world protected her. Unlike pop and R&B, jazz valued discretion and loyalty. Musicians knew everything but rarely spoke publicly. Marlena performed in LGBTQ-friendly venues long before it was acceptable, and many in the queer community considered her one of their own. Her stage banter often hinted at experiences outside heteronormative life. Even her music reflected duality songs of longing, secrecy, and forbidden love. While other stars carefully crafted images, Marlena built a career on fearless authenticity and performance while keeping her personal life behind an impenetrable wall. She wasn't hiding out of shame, she was choosing who deserved access to her truth. Gordy, acknowledging her queerness, officially rewrites her legacy. Marlena Shaw was not just a jazz vocalist, she was a quiet revolutionary. She navigated racism, sexism, and homophobia without losing her identity or her voice. She proved that you could be powerful without being loud, private without being afraid, and queer without being defined by labels. Marlena lived in the shadows of history, but her influence stretched across generations of soul and jazz artists. Now the world finally sees the full picture. Marlena Shaw didn't just sing California soul. She embodied soulful freedom in everything she did. So we must ask, did the world ignore her truth? Or did she master the art of living it without needing permission? Brandy. When Gordy named Brandy as one of the 13 black lesbian stars from the past, the internet exploded because Brandy has always been presented as America's good girl. But behind that carefully crafted image lies one of the most complex careers in music history. Brandy burst onto the scene at age 15 with her 1994 debut album selling over 6 million copies worldwide. By 18, she had her own sitcom Moesha, becoming the first black teen to headline a primetime network show. She voiced Disney's first black Cinderella-dominated R&B radio and set vocal standards that influenced Beyoncé, Rihanna, Ariana Grande, and more. Yet despite being in the spotlight her entire life, Brandy was always guarded, too polished, too controlled, almost like she was protecting something bigger than fame. Throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, tabloids focused on one thing: Brandy was always surrounded by women. Not just friends, intense, inseparable relationships. She traveled with the same female companions, lived with them, and became emotionally dependent on them. Fans noticed her body language was softer, more authentic, more vulnerable around women. But the industry had already built her as the perfect role model for young girls, so any rumor about her sexuality was buried instantly. Then came the fake marriage scandal. Brandy got pregnant in 2002, and her label forced her to lie on national TV, claiming she was secretly married to protect her image. That moment proved one thing: Brandy's life was tightly controlled to appear heterosexual. Behind the scenes, something else was happening. Brandy struggled deeply with identity depression and feeling misunderstood. She spoke often about not being able to be herself. Her relationships with men were short, painful, and often performative. Meanwhile, insiders whispered that Brandy had long-term emotional and romantic bonds with women in the industry, including stylists and background vocalists. Bloggers in the early 2010s wrote blind items about an R&B princess who prefers women but can't come out. Many believed it was her. Even in interviews today, Brandy avoids questions about love with nervous laughter or sudden topic changes. She'll talk about trauma, death breakdowns, but romance, silence. Now that Gordy has placed her in the lineage of hidden black queer icons, Brandy's entire story finally makes sense. The pressure, the secrecy, the emotional collapse after fame. She wasn't just protecting a brand, she was protecting her truth in an industry that would have destroyed her for it. And yet, even while hiding, she transformed music forever. Over 40 million records, sold a vocal layering technique now called the Brandy Stack, and the title, The Vocal Bible. She gave the world her voice even when she couldn't give it her truth. Monica. When Gordy named Monica as one of the 13 black lesbian stars from the past, many people were stunned, but only because Monica played the game of image control better than almost anyone in R&B history. She wasn't marketed as mysterious or edgy. She was the opposite, the real, relatable, around-the-way girl with the powerhouse voice. At just 14 years old, she released her debut album Miss Thang 1995, selling over 3 million copies. By 18, she dropped The Boy Is Mine with Brandy, one of the biggest duets in music history, spending 13 weeks at #1 on Billboard. Unlike other stars, Monica didn't chase trends. She sang about loyalty, heartbreak, and survival with raw honesty. But the industry forgot one thing: being real doesn't mean being fully seen. While Brandy was polished and protected, Monica was fiery, outspoken, and deeply emotional. But just like Brandy, her romantic life never felt fully authentic. She dated men publicly, had very public relationships, and even marriages. But insiders have long said something didn't add up. Monica was always surrounded by women, the same few for years. She traveled with them, lived with them, depended on them. People on tour noticed that her deepest emotional intimacy was with women, not men. Even during her high-profile relationships with industry men, she often spent more time with her female friends than her partners. Industry whispers said, "Monica loves hard, but not always who the public thinks." What makes Monica different from many other stars on this list is that her life was filled with real trauma. She survived an abusive relationship. She held her boyfriend in her arms as he died by suicide. She spoke about grief, depression, needing therapy, but never about her true romantic desires. Why? Because the 90s R&B world loved her authenticity, as long as it was heterosexual. Monica represented strength for black women, single mothers, girls from the South. The image of the strong, straight, loyal woman made her career untouchable. So the industry buried any whispers of queerness to protect the brand, and she let them, choosing survival over honesty. Now that Gordy has finally acknowledged Monica in this hidden lineage, her story takes on a new power. She wasn't just a singer. She was a warrior navigating love, pain, and identity under a microscope. She sold over 25 million records, won Grammy Awards, starred in films and TV, and remained culturally relevant for nearly 30 years. But perhaps her greatest achievement wasn't success. It was the way she protected her heart in a world that wanted to own it. Monica once said, "I love deeply, but I don't have to explain who." And maybe that was her quiet rebellion. So now we must ask, did Monica stay silent to protect her image, or was silence the only way she could love freely in a world that never asked what she really wanted? For decades, the music industry praised these women for their voices while forcing them to hide their truth. Now that Gordy has finally named 13 black lesbian legends from the past, the silence is broken and history must be rewritten. These artists didn't just shape culture, they built it while navigating racism, sexism, homophobia, and censorship. They weren't just talented, they were revolutionary, loving in the shadows to protect their power. But if their truth is only now being acknowledged, what other stories are still buried? In 2025, is the industry finally ready to honor queer black women? Or will their legacy be rewritten once again?